Hello, I'm Bill Fitzgerald, CEO of Ziegler Capital Management. More than that, I'm an investment manager and a father. So when I consider the future, particularly beyond my lifetime, I actively engage in doing what I can with what I have to secure a sustainable future for generations to come. To that end, we've created a freestanding YouTube channel, Thick Sustainable Infrastructure Finance, as a quick and accessible tool to facilitate education and discussion about our common global environmental challenges and our specific efforts to rise to the ultimate environmental challenge. Thoughtful consideration over decades has led us to focus on financing thick, sustainable infrastructure. The following excerpt is one that we hope will help to broaden the conversation or clarify a particular dimension of our work. We hope that you will find it to be worth not only your time, but your further consideration as we all navigate these challenging environmental times together. We hope you decide to engage in the discussion by subscribing to the channel and offering your thoughts on specific episodes. We always learn from our colleagues. Thanks for tuning in, and here's our latest special episode.
Thanks, Rich. So what do you see as being next for distributed generation finance? One specific question we've been interested in is the equipment life and the array refreshment. Also, wind power is experiencing machine rebuilds and rotor replacement. So what does that look like from your perspective?
So I think that project life is, this is something where, we get more and more data every day, right? I mean, a huge amount of the installations in the US, as I said, really as a consequence of the economic crisis. So 2008, 2009, 2010, there's a major uptick in solar installation growth. And there has not been such a material change or advancement in the technology. I think safety standards have gotten better, build standards have gotten better, knowledge around on quality control and everything else. And so, you have warranties, which are very helpful in terms of the major module components to it and the racking and everything else. And those can be 20 to 25 years. Typically, we look at projects on a 30 to 35 year, and sometimes in certain instances, 40-year basis. But I think that that's only part of the story. One of the things that we look at is the value of the system in place, because in a country where transmission and interconnection is so difficult. In fact, today, PJM asked for a reprieve for 2 weeks from reviewing any new solar interconnection applications because they're so overwhelmed. We are in a world where there just aren't enough parking spots for the amount of cars that are trying to park. And so having interconnection and having the rights to interconnection in and of itself is very valuable. So it's one thing to say, okay, well, what is the life of the system as it's built? But then it's another thing to say, okay, well, let's just say this thing, lasts a shorter duration. What's actually valuable is the fact that we have the entitlement to potentially repower that system, 15 or 20 years down the line, and the value that exists within that. So that, I think, again, is a mindset that is increasingly developing around how to look at these investments. As far as it relates to some of the innovations, one of the things that we're working on that we're excited about, and we're doing a lot of research and a lot of thinking around is this notion around for whom solar is installed matters less than where solar is installed. And I would expand that more broadly towards distributed generation. I think one of the unfortunate consequences of a sector that is new is that really, as people look at the investment proposition, and they're saying, okay, well, this is a comparatively new technology. It's a new industry and a new segment of this industry. I really don't want to take credit risk on installing a multi-million-dollar piece of equipment on, Joe's Pizza. And I really only want to do that for Walmart or for Amazon or for high investment grade municipalities. And that is quite unfortunately creating a world where, and you see this a lot in the dialogues, particularly around net metering, where even when you're talking about residential, for a long time, residential solar was only available to people with FICO scores in excess of 750. So now you have a world where, okay, everybody wants us to go renewable, but the only people who can really have it is Walmart and people with 750 FICO scores. There's a lot in between. And that's, I think, as I appeal to John, as an engineer, it actually doesn't entirely answer the technical side of the question, right? These systems should be installed where they provide the most utility. And that is, in many cases, different than who happens to have the best credit at that point. And so one of the areas that we're very excited about and we're trying to do a lot of work on is trying to shift the mindset around, okay, well, it's great that this is a project for, this investment grade hospital system, but it's also great that this is a project that is at a point in the grid that is weaker, and the distributed generation resource can make a difference in the utility plan on whether or not they need to make a greater investment in distribution upgrades. And that thinking is something that I think is going to need to be led by the investment community, because unfortunately, I think the technical argument just gets lost on a lot of people, and it's a shame because it really it can be so valuable, and if there were to be additional value placed on that, that it would be a great opportunity. And community solar is sort of an answer to that. If you think about it, community solar was supposed to be an opportunity for people who don't have roofs that are eligible for solar, or there are a lot of people like that. They are people who happen to live in apartment buildings, and there are a lot of people who live in apartment buildings. And what it has in many cases turned into is just a product, a sort of a synthetic remote net metering product for larger creditworthy entities, because it is a comparatively new part of a new segment. So these are the areas in which we are doing a lot of work, and we're very proud of it. It starts to sound more ESG-like, which we sort of shy away from. We've done, we just announced a deal with Catholic Charities in New York, where we have a community solar project in Westchester, where the offtake will be LMI meters for a Catholic Charities run facility. And we're very proud of that, not because it makes us feel like we should give ourselves a pat on the back, but that is actually expanding access to solar for those who would have not have otherwise had access to solar. And that's an area where we want to work, because at a certain point you can have as much social and political momentum around it, but if the only people who, or the only entities and groups of people who are able to access renewables are rich people or rich companies, that's going to be a problem.
So Rich, following up on something you said, I love this metaphor about a limited number of parking places for too many cars as a means of describing where you put distributed generation. And I'll just offer, if your box is above residential, below 20 megawatt, pretty much solar right now, but there's lots of other things that fit in that box, and they're all competing for those same parking places, right? So to that point, that's a great metaphor. One of our qualifiers is scalability in our thickness evaluation. And scalability is measured against the need or the purpose of the enterprise. It strikes me from that we are scale limited in the grid right now by the grid's ability and the technical ability and the management ability of those who manage the grid. to integrate this into the grid at the distal end. Is that true?
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, I think that this is actually an area where distributed generation should be able to excel relative to utility scale. And in that, I mean DG, including residential, right? Because if we're doing a behind the meter type of project, the interconnection dynamic is not as profound. It's still there, but it's not as profound. Whereas I 100% agree with that statement. I mean, there are, while not all those projects will get built, in terms of utility scale wind and solar, there is probably enough submitted capacity to help us achieve the Paris goals, to achieve the Paris goals. They're just not going to be able to get built in terms of economic feasibility. And a lot of that, I think, is going to be driven from interconnection and transmission. I mean, this is the country needs to address this problem. We, unlike the Europeans who have knocked down most of their electric grid twice in the last 100 years, we have not done that. And so there isn't enough copper on the planet to rebuild our electric grid. So we have to come up with ways of around this that are more creative. And I think that distributed generation, I think energy efficiency, I think battery storage, these are, and distributed generation can be distributed wind, distributed solar, CHP, micro, all the different types of technologies that are going to help address this problem. Because yes, utility scale renewables will continue to be a large driver of growth, in terms of the renewable capacity that is there, but it's not going to be able to do it all, and we have to have multilateral thinking in order to get this done, because the grid operators are just overwhelmed. I mean, and some of it is being overwhelmed, and some is just there's just limited capacity. So you're talking about a world that you would have projects that really could get built in a year, but you now have interconnection timelines that can be 5-6 years out, and when you have that relative to utility scale, that can be very difficult to plan.